is the Classic Metal Show right here on Heavy Metal Television. And this guy that we're going to speak to next, he certainly knows a little thing or two about heavy metal. He's got a great, and I do mean great, new release called BLACKLIST UTOPIA. It's out on October the 29th. You know him from damn near every metal band of the last 30 years because he's been in them all. He is the one and only David Reece. David, how are you, man?
I'm here, baby. What's happening, Chris? Nice to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you too, man. And great record, man. As I was telling you before we started, you make it very easy to do this because I don't have to find the words to pretend I like something that I don't.
Thank you very much. I believe your sincerity. I mean, it's a natural progression from Cacophony of Souls, I think.
Sure.
Took advantage of that imprisonment we all suffered from last year.
Right. So. Well, and that's the thing too is, you know, I've over the past probably 4 or 5 months, I've gotten a slew of records, which have all been written in the pandemic. And almost every one of them is depressing on an Alice in Chains type of a level because everybody was depressed. This is not. I mean, there's some songs on here that definitely you could tell that you were rattling the windows because you were pissed off about being home. But for the most part, at least musically, this is a fun metal record. It's not the kind that you'll come out of and be all depressed and bummed.
Thank you. I mean, lyrically, there's some deep stuff. You know, I went through, Cacophony was released on the 13th of March, 2020, and I had the big release party that weekend. And I think it was the Saturday prior to that the village in my area was where the first explosion happened here in Italy. And I think by that following Friday, the 13th, I had 20 shows canceled. I didn't even want to open my email every day. I fell into a dark space, dude. I thought, well, this is temporary, man. It'll blow over in a couple months. And it just got worse and worse. And so when you say about it being an upbeat kind of metal album, Andy Susumil, the guitar player, was doing his solo thing, recording a solo album, and Malte, the bassist, said, well, no time like the present. Let's write an album. And I said, you're writing? And he said, yeah, I've got a bunch of stuff, and nobody ever wants to listen to it because I'm just the bass player. I said, send me a couple tracks.
Okay.
So he sent me, I think, To the Core, Save Me, and Hindsight. And I went, holy fuck, this guy can fucking write. And he grew up on Metallica, Megadeth, you know, the real heavy shit and the goth era. He's about 10 years younger than me.
Okay.
Well, it was cool because he brought a lot of that real dark, heavy stuff in and those riffs. And it just, it came right out of the pen on the paper, you know, and there was a lot to write about, brother.
Sure.
A lot going on in my head.
I would imagine, man. I mean, it's been a tough time, but you know, I think, and if you look at it as just a picture of the moment, yeah, it was a tough time to write a record. It's a tough time to be a musician, really, you know. But if you look at this record over like a 3-record arc, if you go from Resilient Heart and Cacophony and this, you've really found a groove for yourself that I would argue is maybe the tightest it's been since you've been a recording artist, or at least a known recording artist. I mean, maybe it's just because you've done 3 records in a row under the same umbrella. But
I just it's really tough being in a band, bro. It's tough being a hired guy, and you're writing for their sound, and I spent a lot of years, trying to emulate Coverdale and Paul Rogers. I kind of didn't have that identity thing going, and then my manager said, I don't know what you're doing. He said, you got to go back to Ecstasy and D-Train because that's what you're known for, that Accept album. He said, go heavy, get away from the blues rock, hard rock stuff. Everybody's done it in their mother. So that's kind of where it seems to have grown from.
Sure.
I don't have to kind of write in that record company slot they put you in, that market.
Sure.
Because I don't care anymore. I'm going to write what I want to write. And I think that's the freedom of it. And I appreciate you noticing that and the compliment, because Everybody has said that to me, actually, and vocally they say I'm singing better than I did in the last 10 years, and I don't know what it is, but maybe it's the freedom. I don't know, but
it just seems like you're enjoying what you're doing more. Like even I remember when I interviewed you for Saint and Sinners, and you were kind of like, yeah, you were given the right words, but it just didn't seem like you were as into it as you've been these last couple.
I wasn't, especially on the second album. I didn't like the second album. I mean, I really tried to like the album. I thought the first album we did was pretty good, but extenuating circumstances, once again, that so-called democracy that you live in a band that never existed. I don't care who you are. It's not true.
Sure.
You can have partnerships, but there's no such thing. So I was, you're right. I was a lot of it was lip service, but I had a record to promote, and I'm not going to say it sucked,
Oh, yeah.
for the fans. I mean, it's funny because it came out of the box and did like the second one, Back with a Vengeance, did 600 copies like in the first 3 days. Right. And the record company told me it just stopped. He goes, we thought, wow, this one's taken off. Right. And he goes, it literally after like 3 or 4 days just stopped at 600. And I said, really? I was on the Udo tour, and they came out to see me and were saying, you should come back to the label. And I'm like, I ain't doing no Saint and Sinner stuff anymore. I'm doing this Reece thing. And I go, how did Vengeance do? And he looked at me and goes, we were jumping up and down going, hey, we got something here. And I thought, that record did that good? And he goes, no, dude, but it stopped.
Wow.
So take it as it is. I mean, it's the market. It's maybe people were just excited because they liked the first album so much. They just bought it, and then they realized, hey, this isn't so good. And the word got out. It wasn't as good as the first.
Right.
Sure.
Well, and it's tough to tell these days because sales are so different. Yeah. I mean, what does a sale mean now? A sale basically means that somebody is a very hardcore fan of somebody in the band. It doesn't mean necessarily that they like the music. It's not like the old days where we would hear 2 or 3 songs on the radio and 1.2 million people would buy a record in a week. You got to really be a hardcore fan anymore, it seems like, to buy a record, no?
And it's, I mean, by the week, I can't tell you how many people tell me, the wife said, we're going to make that room, your man cave, into blah, blah, blah now. So get rid of that 20,000 CDs you got and put them all on a streaming service or whatever. Sure. So a lot of guys are going, man, I had to make space. But then I've got the diehard, the truest, the people that say, no, I want to hold it and look at it, play it. So I hear that. But you're right. I'm blessed with that. I mean, I have people from 1988 that still buy my records, and they'll criticize me. They'll write me and say, yeah, I'm not hearing Dave, but I'll still support you. But the last 3 or 4 years, it's been real consistent, and you can't take that for granted. But I mean, a record company is going to tell you how many records they sold because they make that number up.
Right.
They're not going to tell you because they got to pay you.
Mm-hmm.
And you can say, hey, remember when you emailed me that and said we did, 2,600 copies that month? Well, we never said that. Yeah, you did. Well, that was a clerical mistake. Oh, really? I mean, I can't even believe that I'm saying a successful record is 2,600 copies anymore. That one behind me on the wall that's 500,000.
Sure.
And in those days, if you didn't get a 500,000, I mean, they barely talked to you.
Yeah.
In the late 80s at 500,000. If you didn't do a million, on the second one, you were done.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. I'll tell you, I talked to Kevin Martin from Candlebox, I don't know, a week or 2 ago, and obviously a different style of music. But he, I mentioned to him that every release that he's ever done has charted, but then I pointed out to him, well, charting on the first record was 3 million copies. Yep. Charting on the last record was like 4,000 copies.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's almost to the point that charting, quote unquote, charting or sales don't make sense. And I don't know if you agree, but I have never understood why everybody still puts their music on the full album anyway on the streaming service, whether it's Spotify or YouTube or wherever. It seems like you guys would put 4 songs out and then say, hey, if you want the rest, come and buy it. And then maybe even sell it for $5 or whatever.
You license a deal to a label. And what a lot of people don't know with streaming services is those platforms are paying the labels to license my music. So they're getting an advance. But when we see the end of the cookie crumble, it's a tiny little, on the table rat chunk that gets given to the artist. But the labels are still making money, even though they're not putting plastic together by licensing our music, our work to these streaming platforms. Now, you can do it on your own.
Sure.
And, I know a lot of guys that are doing it, and I'll get into that later in this conversation. But but if you want to spend your day glued to the internet and reaching out to get your customers to purchase and and pay for the licensing yourself and all that stuff, you better be prepared to go to work.
Right.
And it's coming to that, it really is. I mean, it's hard on me if I have to write songs and record. I was in the studio all day today, and I've been on the phone before I talked to you for 2 hours.
Sure.
With another guitar player. I mean, there's only so many hours in a day, and I got a wife and kids,
right,
and a dog. But you're saying release 4 songs. I think it's a singles market is the future. Get out there and get a taste of it. But one thing that I do know is bands are buying views on YouTube. I find that ridiculous. It's embarrassing. Hey, look, I got 500,000 views. You know why? Because you're using fake names and you're paying for it.
Right.
Or you're subscribing to it with a fake name and different profiles. And you can buy 10,000 likes or views, for 50 euros. You can buy 100,000 for, 100 euros. It doesn't mean that people are actually looking at it.
Right.
So then I look at the video spectrum, where it used to be, you go to Marty Callner or someone like that, and you'd pay him $100,000 to shoot a video, and it would be played on the top 30, hard 30 with Ricky Rackman. Remember?
Right. Mm-hmm.
You had a hit, and then you went out and you promoted that single. But by the time you finished that record, you spent $2 or $3 million that you had to recoup. Right. Now, I don't think that videos are as necessarily important to promote records, because you go to YouTube, there's like 500 little bizarre videos every 10 seconds. And I can't keep my hand and my brain on how many bands there are.
Sure. Well, and a big part of that too, though, is because there's not a centralized platform to promote anymore. There's not an MTV. And that, to me, I still can't figure out why nobody has picked that ball up, because it just I know there's YouTube and you can pick whatever you want, but let's face it, when we were in the 80s, we didn't want just whatever we wanted. We wanted to be fed what were new bands at the time, whether it was Accept or Motley Crue or, those bands weren't known, Poison, whoever it was. No one knew who they were. They were the new bands.
The Spaceman putting the flag in. I mean, remember that when it came out? It was like, what in the hell is this?
Yeah.
And I mean, I'd spend hours staring at MTV. It was kind of like my news program. It's on the television with the volume down, just so I have some type of visual going on while my brain's. I always explain my brain is like a box full of squirrels that are storing nuts. I don't know if that's from the cocaine abuse in the 80s or what, but I've got this like deranged thing where they're all storing their little products and ideas, in my head. So I have to have all these weird things going on at the same time to make anything work.
Sure. Nice. Well, David, let's pull it back around to the record a little bit.
All right.
Obviously you worked with Andy once again, as a musician, writing partner, etc. What is it about him that you connect so tightly with creatively?
I don't know, dude. I mean, when I met him, we met at Dirk Studios in 87 or 88. He was doing Mean Machine. I was doing Eat the Heat. And we were like the black sheep of the family. Gabby Hauke, who is now Gabby Hoffman, was always the den mother. You can't do this. You can't go there. You can't chase these girls. You can't drink this much. And him and I would run up to the pub and get, crap faced and talk about how much this is bizarre. This isn't rock and roll. This is this is fucking business, man. But
Right.
at the time, we didn't realize that that's what it really was. You know, you can't get shit faced and go do your job. So I don't know. We just kind of connected, and then I hadn't seen him for years, and it was weird because I was in LA like during after Accept, and so was he, and we were haunting the same places with the same people, and we never crossed paths. He was there 7 years. I came back to Germany. I was at a Halloween party, and somebody grabbed me by the back, and I don't like that very much. I don't know about you, and somebody grabs me. I spun around, and it was Andy smiling at me, going, "Happy Halloween. What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Dude." So we just have this, like, I don't know. It's just that it's like I can go without speaking to that dude for like a year or so.
Right.
I can pick up the phone and say, "Hey, you ready to write some song?" "Yeah, why not?" And he goes, "Send me some words. I need something to write to." And I'll send him a story. It just kind of works. And he's production value of the guy. The guy as a producer, he's amazing. I mean, and all the time that he spends, his guitar playing, number one, is probably what I love about him. He's got Gary Moore, he's got Schenker, he's got all those guys, but he's also got Andy Susamil in his style. And if you listen to this album, you really hear it. You know, just the accuracy, the notes, the vibrato, the tones. He has like 3 amplifiers running into one, and all this crazy shit at home in the studio. And you know, he's really worked on that sound for years. And it's criminally underrated as a guitar player, because in UDO, I thought he was better than Matthias Dieck. I just liked his emotional feel, because I like a Michael Schenker kind of guitar player anyways.
Sure.
But Andy's also a great singer. He can arrange melodies. And that's why I just trust him. I just throw it at him and say, "Here, mix it." I was actually in Denmark when he was mixing the album, and I was doing a roofing job for a big company, and I have a day job because of the way the business is. I was running tar roofs. And when I got the masters, I was like, "Yep, he did it again."
Sure.
You know?
Well, and what's unique about him is that he doesn't sound the same from artist to artist he's worked for. And I'll point to the UDO stuff. I find the UDO stuff to be very, I'm going to say, mechanized or metallized or something, you know, where the stuff with you, a lot warmer, lot more organic sounding. Doesn't sound like it was cut with a chisel, you know, and that's pretty amazing for a guitar player to, you know, I mean, the virtuoso guys, if you think about them, they all sound the same. It's all boo, you know, they all sound the same. And the same with kind of the rock guys. You know, the rock guys all kind of 3-chord riff, you know, with a little solo mixed in. Andy has a very different style from band to band anyway, which is very refreshing to hear.
Yeah, and it's criminally underrated that you ought to hear the guy play country music. He's a German. The guy can play country music. He was actually in LA working with some famous country guy. I can't remember the name, playing guitar for him. And the guy was like, "Where did you come from?" And he just playing an old Strat and a Les Paul and going, "Well, I listened to this as a kid." And, you know, he's got all those colors, you know, and that's what makes him so great. I mean, you know, we butt heads. We're like brothers. I mean, but we never, ever hold an anger issue or a grudge against one another. It never lasts. Like, he refuses to be vaccinated.
Okay.
Absolutely refuses it. Doesn't want to be tested, which means Andy's not going to tour with me. I mean, it's just the way we can't leave the country without this damn passport.
Sure.
And he said, "Forgive me, but I can't accept it, and I'm not doing it." I said, "Okay, Andy, but I'm going to have to replace you on stage. I'm going to hate it." And he goes, "I know, but I'm not going there." Right. He's staunch in his beliefs of what he wants to do. And I didn't want to get it either, but I know the game. I got to play it.
Dude, I could tell you the horror story about that, as I just got out of the hospital with it for 3 weeks ago. So
you had COVID?
Oh yeah. COVID and pneumonia, and had to be hospitalized for a week.
Jesus. You're all right now?
Yeah. 80% maybe, you know, still a little short of breath, but whatever. It's not too bad. So
that pneumonia will knock you on your ass, dude. That'll hold on to you for months.
You don't have to tell me, sir.
I know about it.
Oh, it's awful. But, well, dude, one song in particular that I wanted to talk to you about on Blacklist Utopia, because it's really showcasing you, and I don't know if it's on purpose or just where you were, but what I'll say is probably the most different approach I've ever heard you do, which is down to the core. The early parts, I mean, when you get to the chorus parts, it's kind of your natural voice.
Yeah,
but the lead-ins, lower tone, little more mean or evil, or I don't know how to put it exactly, but it was a sound that I was not used to hearing from your music. And so I wanted to ask you, did you try to do something different, or did it just kind of organically grow that way?
It's a weird thing because I've gone back to a lot of, it's going to be nuts to say this, but I like Iggy Pop. I like David Bowie a lot. I mean, I listen to those guys and it kind of went over my head. I always liked Bowie the most, but it went over my head as how great he was.
Sure.
When he sang, you know, Job stumbled into town just like a sacred cow. Visions of swastikas in my head. I mean, if you listen to that tone, it's kind of jazzy. And then I listen to guys like George Jones and I listen to Frank Sinatra. And I said, you know what? Why am I screaming in the top of my register at 61 years old? There's got to be something down here that I haven't really been playing with. And when I started, like if I'm rehearsing at home, I sing low. So then that song just called for that. If you listen to, there's a song on Resilient Heart. What is it? Live Before You Die. You know, it's low. I've been doing that for the last 3 albums. Each album has 2 or 3 that have the, and then I build it into that big, you know, stratosphere chorus, and then I come back down. It's kind of nice, you know, show off what you got and save your voice at the same time.
Little easier in the studio and it still sounds good.
Yeah. You can still speak when you come home. So
exactly. So the other one, obviously the first single that you gave everybody was I Can't Breathe. So talk a little bit about that song and why it was chosen as the feature track.
Okay. The whole George Floyd thing, I don't condone that at all. Watching 3 cops stand around with a guy with a knee in his neck. The guy died. Terrible. That's my old neighborhood.
Okay.
I grew up I didn't grow up there. I was born in Oklahoma, but I spent a lot of time in the south side of Minneapolis and literally in a house about 5 minutes from where all that went down. So to watch my neighborhood where I used to walk to get my milk and my beer and my cigarettes and live my life in the peaceful little neighborhood burning to the ground really got to me. And my aunt has got polio and she's in a wheelchair full time and she can't leave the house pretty much as it is anyways, but I didn't know what was happening. I got a lot of friends in Minnesota. And then this whole political, you're either with us or you're against us. So then let's get into this blacklist utopia. You know, I don't agree with, you know, what they did or what he did or anything. I think the whole thing was a terrible situation as the kettle was starting to boil. But if you don't follow that woke agreeing that with all those people, you're automatically put into this blacklist.
Right.
If they don't come over to the people that think kind of like me, they're put into a blacklist. So my dream was one night was, what utopia are we really looking to achieve? And that, let's say, yeah, this is what we've been waiting for, honey. There you are. So we get to that so-called utopia that everybody's seeking. Will they be satisfied? People aren't satisfied with anything. But I Can't Breathe lyrically is a spoof, not because he says I can't breathe. It's because I'm getting choked to death every day I wake up with what I'm hearing on social media. A guy like Dave Chappelle, you know, what happened to him 2 days ago, God bless him. But they're eating his ass for just saying every human being came out between a woman's legs. It is fact. But because he just kind of brought it up, it's a sensitive issue. They're out to get him. And I know he did it on purpose. It got everybody's ear. I mean, he's a genius, but it's basically, I can't breathe because I'm just, you know, I don't care what you do at home. I don't care what you believe in. I mean, just be nice and treat each other cool, you know, and we'll be a better planet. You know, I don't agree with all this can't eat all this red meat and all this crap. I mean, quit pushing it down my throat.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, I'm in the entertainment business, dude. And I mean, literally last year, a major magazine called me a racist because they had an African-American writer who had been in a chat box and found out that I do have conservative issues and values that I espouse to. And automatically, because I have those, I was called a racist. And somehow I had to write to this editor, and he was saying, you need to write an apology. And I said, I'll apologize for nothing.
Exactly.
Number one, 90% of my family is mixed race, which pretty much everybody's family is now.
Right.
I've got Native American blood in my veins. My granddaughter is Blackfoot Indian, half. I mean, so I don't know where it came from. It was just somebody found that word that they wanted to see and went on the attack dog. So that's where I Can't Breathe comes from.
Okay. Yeah, it's you know, I talk about this all the time. I so hate cancel culture, like you and everybody else does. And you know, the big thing I always point to is maybe 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, but dude, we just didn't talk about politics. We didn't talk about if I never knew any of my friends' politics. I never knew if they were conservative or Democrat or whatever. And if you touched on something that was sensitive to your friends, you were like, well, let's not talk about that. Let's talk about which Iron Maiden album was better or whatever. You know, you just focused on the things that you did get along with.
Yeah, when you hung out with your brothers, it was you were going out to the club or you're going to a big show because you all loved Maiden or Priest.
Yeah.
And if you guys had an argument, it was usually because somebody had to pay more for beer or had more cigarettes. But it was always, that's what I'm saying. It's terribly sad that that magic has been sucked out of our heads. Yeah. And we're so poisoned by this cancel culture that I think it's affecting music. I think it's affecting everything.
Sure is.
And you're right. You hit it on the head. I mean, I played with guys that I've learned now back in the 80s that are super liberal. I had no idea how they thought. They went to very liberal colleges in Ohio and places like that, came back with a different viewpoint. Now they won't even speak to me. And we were like blood brothers, man.
Sure.
Like you said, we didn't talk about our politics. We smoked weed together. We played gigs together. We rode in a car for thousands of miles, argued about everything but politics.
Right. Politics and religion, they were off limits. You just didn't talk about that stuff.
That's right.
I'll say it, and you'll probably agree with me. It's social media. Everybody now, because they get 3 likes, they think that they're an expert on everything and that everybody's listening to what they have to say. You know, and to your point where you were saying it's affected music, it has affected music because 2 reasons. One, too many of these guys are throwing their opinions out to alienate half their audience. That's the first thing. And the second,
know why? Because they're scared. They want to stay up there in the limelight. And they say if they're afraid, if they really speak how they really think, they're done.
Yeah.
That here today, gone later today is real prevalent right now.
Sure, it definitely is. But it's going to bite them later because this stuff, when the pendulum always shifts from one side to the other. And when it goes the other way, it's going to be just like this, like John Gruden thing this week. When it goes the other way, well, all these opinions that you had that were pro-liberal or hard left liberal are going to swing back and people are going to alienate you. It's the way the world always works.
It's like this, what social media has seemed to have done. I watched this guy named Boots O'Neill. I love cowboy stuff. I like ranching. I like rodeo and he was going to be 90 years old. And they are saying, what has changed in your life? What do you see? Well, them things you carry around called telephone. Never thought that I could carry it and go outside and call somebody. I used to ride a horse looking for a bull.
Right.
And then you'd ride back and say, did you find him? Now I can call you or give you a little app and say, he's right here. And you can follow it and find him. He said, but the worst thing about it was I like to visit and talk. And he goes, I was at the dinner table and I was at the end and there were 15 or so cowboys sitting on the table looking at their iPhones, eating their beans and eating cornbread. And I had nobody look at me and say a word. Their eyes were glued to their phone. We've lost the intimacy of human contact.
Sure.
Which is music. which is theater, which is movies. Look at movies.
Yeah.
How many people, go to the drive-in? How many people go out to the theater? We got one here in our village in Piacenza, Italy, which is kind of cool. They get all the happening ones, but I've been in there and there's 20, 30 people.
Sure.
You can get it on Netflix. You don't even have to leave your house.
Yeah. No, and people don't want to. It's kind of like what we were saying before about, how you're lucky that your fans still buy physical product. Well, it's because they're older. The younger, the young kids to I'll say 30, the last 10 years of that we're kids, they don't know value of music. They don't know value of movies. If it's not on their iPhone, it doesn't exist to them. It's the same reason they don't want full albums, because they don't have any value to that. They don't listen like we listen to Led Zeppelin 4 start to finish over and over and over. We never popped it in and forwarded the tape to going to California or something. It was just put it on at song 1, listen till the end, and you grew with it, and it became part of you.
Exactly.
And
you
now,
could not wait to get to the drum sound of When the Levee Breaks.
Right.
And go, oh my God, I'm in it right now. I mean, you're in it. You were in it. And when you got Killers from Iron Maiden, and when you got Accept, Restless and Wild, and they were doing the Heidi Ho thing and that scratch of the record and that scream by Udo, everybody at the couch put down the bong and looked at each other going, what the fuck is this?
Exactly.
And that's all you talked about, man. I mean, it's like, I drove some of my non-music friends crazy because I would analyze UFO albums.
Sure.
I would look into those singers and those guitar players like they were special.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't do that anymore. Like we talked about Andy earlier. I mean, there's guys out there that deserve to be recognized. Mm-hmm. And this shit is sucking our brains dry.
Sure. No, you're right. And we cared so much about the music back then that it wasn't even the musicians all the time. It was like the producers. I can't tell you how many records I bought because it said produced by Bo Hill or Ted Templeman or, the various guys that were popular then. Right now, I couldn't even tell you who's a producer. I have no idea. And I'm in the business. They're
sitting around right now behind a laptop like you and me.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're buying Pro Tools 10, 11, 12, 13. What is it, up to 20 now with different plugins? Mm-hmm. And a guy like Andy Sneap, he's one of the true metal guys still around, doing Priest and doing Accept. He's like the go-to guy. And the Dennis Wards and all those guys that were kind of been around for 30, 40 years, they weren't at the hierarchy of Mutt Lange or Dieter Dierks or, Jimbo Barton at Queensryche and those guys. I mean, they were almost as famous as the band.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And to be signed and get to just sit down in a room with those guys and go, have a producer like Mutt Lange look at you and say, nah, when you're ready to be a rock and roll star, write me some better songs, and walk out of the room. And, the guy's asking $1 million to do your record and looks at you and goes, you ain't ready yet.
Right.
And you're like, how fucking dare you? And it would devastate you.
Sure.
And then you'd go, okay, go pick up my guitar and go sit down and write a better song, and then come in and go, I did. And you go, oh, yeah, you're kind of getting it now. Let's work on this album,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing. They were so much a part of it. I interviewed Max Norman, I don't know, a year or two ago, and it was fascinating just hearing how he talked about little nuances that average fans don't get, like how he was in the studio with Megadeth and he kept moving the drums around because the delay, and as well as I do, the delay is so minute that none of us would hear it, but he heard it. And that's how he ended up making perfect albums. He was so attention to detail oriented, and you can't argue that when you see the proof in the pudding, the Ozzy records and the Megadeth, I
mean, he produced Bangalore Choir on Target. Yeah, he told me the Ozzy story, sitting in a room with Randy Rhoads, just his mouth hanging open, going, "Who is this kid?" And then being in the studio with Ozzy and punching in every word because he couldn't sing a whole verse. And he goes, after 12 hours in a room with Ozzy, it's like you're in a giant egg. And it's like you're on a spaceship in another void. And he goes, but it's so cool. You're standing there with Ozzy, like he would say, was that good? Yes, double it. And they go back and double the word and then sing another word. Good.
Right.
And he goes 12, 15 hours of this. It's maddening, but hey, I'm in a room with Ozzy, you know?
Right. Sure. And then and then the final product sold 6 million copies, 8 million copies, whatever it was.
Groundbreaking. Crazy Train. Those albums, those first 2 albums, I mean, Ozzy rose from the dead.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
you know?
absolutely. He was his career was, if he would have come out today, career would have been done. He would have never had his solo career.
Never. But it says something about the power of his it factor. Ozzy has it. You know, there's the thing. There's another thing too that's missing, I think, in these artists, the it factor. I mean, there's just nothing. You know, they're here today, gone later today. I mean, Steve Lukather said it a couple of years ago. He called music today McDrive music. He said people buy like their extra large French fry. And that's how they listen to their streaming. By the time you get out of the parking lot and hit the first stoplight, you've already eaten the box of fries, and then you're fumbling with the box to open up the triple quarter pounder with cheese. And by the time you get to your destination, you've forgotten what you've eaten.
Right.
And you're licking your fingers, and then it's just like music. There's no, you know, it's like people are thinking about so many different things. They're not listening to the levee breaks or going to California. They're not waiting for that sound that Jimmy Page would come up with, those little guitar colors that every time you listen to a Zeppelin album, you go, I never heard that before. That's pretty cool what he put there. Your ear gets more trained.
You know what's interesting is, if you look just at raw numbers of what is super popular today, it's kind of the same as it was in the 80s, not musically, not at all musically, but in the sense that it's the stuff that doesn't sound homogenized. Like we were, as an example, just on the show last week, we were talking about Billie Eilish, and we pulled up her big hit, that Bad Guy song. And it has, between YouTube and Spotify, it has 5 billion with a B plays. Just ridiculous numbers of play. 5 billion plays. And the first thing that came into my mind was, she doesn't sound like every other pop artist. You know, she sounds different. She sounds like she's asleep to me, but she sounds different. And it's selling because it sounds different.
It's
Adele
got the it factor.
Well, that's it. She has that it factor that hasn't been heard in the female singer world maybe since Madonna, the early Madonna. You know,
who really grabbed me, and then Sammy Hagar. I watched an interview with him. I think it's his birthday today.
Yeah,
they were talking to him a few days ago, and they go, "Who does it for you?" And he said, "You know, I had a little old band from Southern California open for me called Rival Sons."
Oh yeah.
And he goes, "Let me tell you, son, that singer, his son got something." He goes, Not many singers get me excited. He goes, but I watched every show they did with me. And he goes, keep your eye on Rival Sons. That's a band I like.
Yeah,
I like the Honey. What are they called?
Dirty Honey.
Dirty Honey.
Yeah,
I like them.
Very good band.
I've been on a real, and this is crazy, I've been on a real Tom Petty trip the last couple of years. This Wildflowers re-release of stuff he didn't put out. It's supposed to be a double album, but he didn't do that. And I found out with Tom Petty that he could say more with 3 words than I can do with 20. He could say, you know, you got lucky when I found you, you know, break down. I mean, the guy just had this genius of, you know, and he stole from the Byrds, he stole from Dylan, but he put something in there that worked, you know. So that's where I'm at. I mean, these new artists, I mean, the Rival Sons been around for a few years. Sure, they've been playing California clubs, and then they finally got a break. But these people, like you're talking about, this girl, you know, 5 billion. I mean, that's like the continent of India, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. But I'll bet you that 10 years from now, she's not going to be around. No, you know,
not like Paul McCartney.
No, not at all. I mean, dude, if we're going by numbers, and this is a big difference by not owning a product. If you don't own a product, you have no connection or loyalty to it. None. You're just watching it, you know, and if you want to just go number of plays, that Gungan Style song had 1 billion plays. It was the first song ever to have 1 billion plays. What happened to that guy? He's long gone.
Yep.
You know,
I don't even know where he's at.
Yeah, nobody's heard from him since that song.
It's crazy.
That was the first ever song to have 1 billion plays. So, you know,
yeah, it's funny. Bands like Zeppelin and all that stuff, people are going, before I die, please regroup and play with Jason on drums, do a tour. You know, I mean, that says something. When the guys are in their late 70s and pushing 80, and they're going, I would pay to see it. Okay. Sure. Just to say, I've already seen Zeppelin back in the 70s, but just, you know, one more time, you know, I mean, that's a legacy. Paul McCartney, I never got to see live. I missed his ticket in Cologne by about 10 seconds, sold out in like 5 minutes.
Right.
I mean, I really wanted to see Paul McCartney in Wings. I mean, these are the guys that really, I mean, I'm a huge Steely Dan fan as well.
Sure.
I mean, you listen to those records, I don't care. When you talk about production,
oh yeah,
holy crap. And the detail that they put into that, and the number of great artists that sang on those records that I wasn't aware of, like Don Henley and Glenn Frey and Timothy B. Schmidt. I mean, just insane production. You know, the guy Katz that produced that stuff.
Sure.
I mean, you listen to that music and it's just mind blowing. And there's hooks and it's pop, but it's also jazz and it's hard rock and it's dark and it's. I mean, there are certain bands that just have a sound, yeah. And that's. I hope before I croak that somebody says Reece had a vibe. You know, I know that's Dave Reece singing.
Well, I'll say that, as I said at the beginning.
But I mean, that's really all. I mean, I'm not going to get rich doing this, but I do it because I love it. And if somebody just says, you know what, that's Reece, he could sing. And it was some great records that he made. That's enough for me.
And without kissing your ass, I like the fact that you're doing it without bands now. You know, I mean, Bonfire and Tango Down and whatever. Okay. You know, those are okay. But I personally find the stuff that you're doing where you're making all the decisions to be more heartfelt and more pure, I guess.
Yeah. You know, I look at it 2 ways. You know, it's survival.
Sure.
You know, and nobody gave a shit after I disappeared for 9 years. Then I came back and everybody and their brother wanted me to sing on their album, which is cool. So I did the bad thing, I guess, in a way, by jumping on and doing all those multiple projects. But then at the same time, I had to eat. And then it kind of opened the door and led me down this road to where I am now. So it's a good thing in a way. There's a payoff from it. But all those bands, I mean, if we're going to get into it now, I'm going to tell you, you want to hear about what I'm up to besides this?
Sure, absolutely.
During this whole COVID thing, I did kind of go back to doing some projects, which out of a necessity. So the band out of Bulgaria called John Steele, Doogie White did one of their albums. Blaze Bayley did one. I did one. Okay. Great guys. I go over there once in a while and play some festivals with them. Really super cool guys. And it's a progressive metal record, which is really good.
Sure.
So I did that. And then I've done, you know, a lot of session work for different artists like Taz Taylor, Christian Bettendorf, Stefan Georg, a bunch of guys around Germany and Canada and Australia have called me and say, hey, can you sing a song? How much? Blah, blah. Yeah. Keeps my voice in shape.
Sure.
Puts things on the table, blah, blah, blah. But the cool thing that happened at all of this was Jimmy Waldo is on my album. He co-wrote a couple tracks with me, you know, from Alcatraz.
Alcatraz, right.
And I don't know, do you know who Steve Rosen is?
I do not.
He is, if you go to YouTube, Steve Rosen used to interview, I think he worked for Guitar World magazine. He was the editor of that magazine, interviewed everybody, every guitar player from the beginning to you name it, Eddie, Billy Gibbons, Brian May, all of them. And what he said was during that period, I'll give you the cover if you play an album if I ever make one. Okay, sure, Mike. They always say yes to get on the cover.
Right.
And he also wrote for Rolling Stone.
Okay.
So you go to YouTube and you can find Steve Rosen and his interviews with all these great guitar players. Well, Jimmy contacted me through my manager and said, hey, Steve's ready to do a record. We're going to call in the artillery. And I go, what does that mean? And I need you to write, I think there's 11 tracks on the album. We did 2 Blackthorn songs because Bob Kulick had just passed away.
Sure.
And they wanted me to re-sing the Grand Bonnet stuff. So I did that. But I wrote 9 vocal tracks with Steve and Waldo.
Okay.
And they brought in the artillery, meaning Bumblefoot, Joe Satriani, Steve Vai,
wow,
Paul Gilbert, you name it. It's a cornucopia of the greats, which I'm in the room of royalty with guitar players that are playing on my songs.
Right.
And the band is called, it's a project band called the Highway Sentinels. It was going to be, now that name, I'll get to that. Highway Sentinels was in my head that if I could put together the perfect metal band, what would it be?
Right.
I need a name. So I had it in my head, Highway Sentinels. Well, during that time, guess who calls me? Herman Frank from Accept.
Okay, yeah.
Out of the blue, Herman Frank. Now, here's a guy that I played in the same band as he did.
Sure.
We've done festivals, and I said, I get to meet this Herman Frank guy finally. We would miss each other by minutes, and we never physically met.
Okay.
But we connected, because of this crazy octopus of music.
Right.
So he says to me, hey, we should do a project together, do a record together. And I said, Herman, that's a great idea.
Sure.
I got a band name. It's called Highway Sentinels. He goes, hate it. Let's get more metal. So we ended up coming up with Iron Allies.
Right.
And now we've got like 22 songs recorded. We're shopping labels right now, and everybody's going, yeah. And I said earlier, I don't want to be in a band.
Right.
But if I'm going to be in a band, it's with Herman Frank, Donnie Von Staven from Riot, and Francesco Giovino, who played on my solo album, Blacklist Utopia, on drums,
right.
Which will actually, with these promoters, because they're all thinking, like you said, homogenized.
Mm-hmm.
If the more well-known faces you got on stage playing together,
sure.
the more punters are going to come to the show.
Right.
So
sure.
with our history, we can do Accept, we can do Iron Allies, we can do Riot, we can do all this stuff, right?
Right.
And the music we're writing together is killer. I mean,
Great.
Herman Frank is another one like Andy. He's one of those guys that never got his due.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love his guitar playing. And,
yeah, I mean, his stuff, whether it's his Herman Frank stuff, though he put one out last year, or what was the other one? Panzer, which was fantastic. I mean, obviously the Accept stuff is good too. So, Herman is great.
Yeah, I was on the phone with him for 2 hours tonight. We're talking about a deal we were offered for this new album. And that's coming out sometime next year, just like Highway Sentinels will come out early next year. The John Steele stuff is coming out. I don't know when, because there's a backlog because of this pandemic crap. But I was pretty lucky to be offered these situations just of survival, and I took it.
Right, sure.
Because, I mean, I'm an American living in Italy, and I have a work visa, but being that I speak about 50% of the language, it makes it real difficult for me to get a normal job here. So I can go to Scandinavia and work all day long because everybody speaks English more than their own language. Right. So that's why I was up there, just so I could feed my family and take care of the house. That's what I'm doing. You're
busy, man, which is, in the end of the pandemic, or I don't even want to say the end, but wherever we're at the pandemic right now, that's a good place to be, to have releases coming up and a release out now and or 2 weeks. And, I'm assuming you're going to go out on the road at least somewhat and try and play these things if you can.
I had October in Norway. That just got pulled off from under me. And I had Spain in November. That just got pulled off from me. Everything's been pushed to next year.
Sure.
That's happened like twice now. 3 times, but right now nothing the rest of the year. So I'm just writing songs and keeping the voice in shape and working out and trying to eat right and not. I mean, I gave up alcohol 3 years ago, so that was the best thing I ever did. I'm a new person. Maybe that's what you hear in my music. I don't know, because I had to have a drink when I woke up for 30 years, but now I'm sober, and I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to let all this get to me. I mean, I refuse to fall to pieces over this. I mean, I'm just going to forge ahead.
That's it. That's all you can do, man. I mean, everybody that's panicking and the world is over and blah, 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 that doesn't fix it. So why do it? Just kind of ride it out.
If we're all going to be vaporized, what are we going to do about it anyways? We're going to run. I don't have a lead container I can crawl on the ground and hide it in for 10 years.
Exactly right, man.
I'll just stand with my arms out going, come on, man, like on Forrest Gump when he was riding the ship,
Right.
Lieutenant Dan, come on, let's go.
Exactly.
This is how it's got to end. Let's do it big.
Exactly, man. Well, dude, you've definitely done it big here. The new release, Blacklist Utopia. It is David Reece. It's out on October the 29th, I believe, everywhere. And
El Puerto Records.
And where should I tell people to go to keep up with you, man?
Oh, David Reece Official, Facebook. If you do buy the CD, I'm asking all my friends and fans that have bought it to do a short video and post it on my page. Because last year I did Rock and Roll Family holding it up when they got it. But I think it's more personalized. They say, hey, I just got this. And a good or bad review, whatever you got, just tell the folks and where you got it from.
Sure.
You know, we got it. I think there's this whole shipment and unloading thing going on.
Right.
Like they're in America, which is freaking me out a little bit, which I'm powerless over. But it seems like the mail is moving pretty quick. But if anything on a boat, I don't think you're going to get it. But I think, everything's flown with Amazon.
Right.
All that stuff. But yeah, keep buying physical. I support the bands that are out there doing it. I share a lot of bands that I like. I mean, I'm always trying to help my friends. They share me. Just go to David Reece and tell me what you're thinking.
Fair enough. All right, one more time, David. It is called Blacklist Utopia. It is the new release from David Reece. And David, once again, man, it's always great to talk to you here on a Classic Metal Show.
Dude, you're a great interviewer, man. God bless you, brother. And I'm glad you're back on your feet. I'm sorry you were sick. Fantastic interview.
Thanks, man. Thanks for checking out this episode of The Classic Metal Show. Get all of our episodes uncensored at www.theclassicmetalshow.com. Join us weekly from 9 p.m. till 3 a.m. Eastern at www.cmsradio.net. Participate in the live chat room at www.chatandkill.com. Once again, thank you for checking out The Classic Metal Show with Neely and Chris. Hail and kill, fuck you, pal, and hand job!
This is it.